So everybody, thank you for tuning in. And thank you to all the panelists for coming out. My name is Carla. I'm going to go around and let everybody introduce themselves. And I'll start with Brian.
Hi, everybody. Brian Meiler. I'm currently working at BMG as the director in film and TV licensing, Creative Sync on the master side, so the frontline side. But I also come from the Christian world where I was A&R at Word Records in the late 90s, early 2000s. So it's going to date me a little bit. So I spent years in Nashville working, and so I'm here today, but I've been in LA for a while now. So that's me.
Thank you. Jen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hey guys, Jen Bontusa. I am a VP over at Ingrooves Label and Artist Partnerships here in Nashville. So I have spent over 13 years in total with the company. I started in California and now here about 2 years in Nashville. I married, have a 5-year-old son, and you may hear him in the background at some point laughing, but I'll try to keep him quiet, but yeah.
Awesome. And Kaitlyn, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey guys, I'm native Nashvilleian and work at Starstruck Entertainment in the management division here. And previously worked at Activist Artist Management in Nashville as well. So that's me.
Great. And then Laramie from my same company. You want to introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Laramie Lomanto, work at FBMM as an account executive. I've been in Nashville since like 2012. Yeah, so that's 8 years. I've been in the music industry on the business side for 4 years, but I grew up in Texas singing and playing country music, which is what brought me to Nashville in the first place.
Awesome. And then Deborah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sorry, my mute was keeping me quiet. My name is Deborah Fairchild. I am the president of Veva Sound. So we started in Nashville back in 2005, and then I moved to New York and opened that office in 2006, and then LA in 2008, and then we did London in 2013. So I've kind of lived in those 4 cities, and I'm now back in Nashville. And thank you for inviting me. I do think there is some differences with working in a southern state and southern city and being in the music industry. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. So all of our panelists have worked in the South, lived in the South. I believe Brian has since moved on to a different city. So I think everyone's going to have a great perspective on this. So the first question that we want to start the discussion with, and if anyone wants to chime in, feel free to just answer. And if you don't have anything to add, don't feel pressured to. But the first thing we wanted to ask you guys was, have you faced discrimination in the workplace, and what has that looked like for you?
I can start.
Okay.
During my time in Nashville, I was single and then actually married a woman. So I was not out of the closet yet. So working at Word, it just didn't look like I could be myself. Not that I got married because I worked at Word, but I fell in love and thought that was the true path I was supposed to be on, and was praying the gay away, everything you're supposed to do, apparently. And then once I got divorced, I knew that it was an environment where I could not come out. There's no way I could have survived being A&R at a Christian record label, selling us and trying to sign bands to, even though I was the rock guy at, BMG when POD and everything was, and Evanescence started and Sixpence we had, but it was still tough. So I faced the problems I faced was just the general idea of you couldn't be who you were going to be. So being kind of the different guy, I always got poked fun at being a little more effeminate, you know, and what I would do, I would talk about colors and what the artist was wearing. And I cared about all these things that the other A&R didn't, but I was like so they could tell something was different with me. So I kind of just hid it from them. But working at BMG, I did not take this job until I knew it was a comfortable place. So working with BBR in Nashville and BMG in LA and New York, I knew I wouldn't be put in a bad situation because they're so supportive. So I had a little twinge of it because I hid it really well for many years. So I'm a little different case than a lot of people.
I don't think I didn't face any discrimination. I was lucky to start my career with Ingrooves in San Francisco, you know, so I'm in one of the queerest places that you can be, right? And it was a super small company at the time. I was employee number 10. So we were very much a young company and it was like a family. And, you know, like Brian had just mentioned, like so much of your day and your life is surrounded by your workmates. And if you don't feel comfortable being yourself like that, it's just like, yeah, not cool. And you know, honestly, that's why I went back to Ingrooves. I left for a short period a couple of years ago, and I went back because really, to me, I have like lifelong friendships out of that company. And it's, you know, even though we've moved on to different places, it's, I don't know, I think it's just so important who you work with and being able to be yourself, you know? So I know I was very fortunate in that.
Yeah, I'll jump in if.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so back when I was hired at this company, I started as an archival engineer, and it was very much, I work in audio, and so a lot of the audio engineers are men and things like that, and working for people where it was very understood of just their comments and things they would say. And for whatever reason, they didn't assume or ask me if I were gay or anything like that. And so my insecurity was really around knowing, I didn't want to know what they really thought. And so I was really insecure and would just hide it because it was just easier. And so even using, I would never say my girlfriend, I would just say they and them and we and stuff like that. I never said her and she. And then moving to New York, thankfully, I only worked in Nashville for 9 months. And then I moved to New York, which seeing that difference was crazy. And I was so much happier up there. And then for different reasons, we ended up moving back to Nashville, which is like one of those things where that culture shock back to Nashville. But it was really important to me to, as I started building the company, to create a different environment for all the engineers I hired and letting them know right away that I was a lesbian. And then once I got married, it was really great because now I talk about my life probably ad nauseum to some people, but it's just a much easier thing than me seeing how I was treated and how I work really hard to not repeat those things and to be really open.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing. So going off of that, I know a lot of you have talked about Nashville, but working in the South in general, over the last 10 years, have you seen things getting better? How have things changed working in a Southern music city within the last 10 or so years? And also, how does it compare to working in LA or New York?
I'll say I've been born and raised here, so I've been around, and I think as more people from other places have moved into Nashville especially, and you know, really settled in and started working here and living here, I feel like it's brought in a diversity of perspective and culture here. And I think that's been one of the biggest differences, but overall, I think that Nashville still has a long way to go. But I think that one thing that it has going for it especially is I feel like I've never lived in LA or New York, but I've worked closely with people in both areas. I think that Nashville does have a special charm in the sense of networking. I feel like here it's a lot easier to reach out to someone and ask to have a phone call or get a drink or get coffee or chat about the industry, and it be met, you know, a little bit nicer than sometimes in other cities. And so I do think that that is part of the Southern charm, so to speak, but I think that it's gotten better with some of the influx of culture that's come from areas like New York and LA.
I can tell you, working, I was also a producer on Last Call with Carson Daly, and having the type of artists like Brandi Carlile on the show and Jamie Wyatt, and just amazing, you know, artists from Nashville, or just country artists that embraced who they were to be on the show. I was super supportive of that. And just the type of artists that we're working with BBR. I mean, I show up at BBR shows, whether it's Zach Brown when he was on, you know, whatever show, and I'm myself and Backstage. I don't think I would have had that 20 years ago. You know, I would have felt like I couldn't be myself, but I feel like now I can be myself with any artist that we have, because, you know, I just feel like the music is changing in the country world a little bit more from what I see with, like, you know, just ethnicity, gender, you know, all of it just seems just vast, more accepting, you know, in general on my end. So I can only speak for me, so I don't want to assume, but, you know.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think a lot more companies are being more vocal about their support. So this past year, we co-hosted or co-sponsored a brunch with a company called Open Play and UMG Nashville. And that was the first time UMG Nashville had actually hosted and put their name and logo on a brunch during Pride downtown, you know, which I think anyone new coming into the industry, that's a really powerful statement to see a huge record label company with country artists as their roster with the flag behind their logo, you know. So I think that's been a really cool, positive spin that started to happen more in Nashville. Is the other labels that we work with in other cities, that's like a no-brainer. Like in LA, that's not even a thing. I don't think as much. But because of more companies getting involved here and being outwardly facing, I've noticed more people coming out that work at companies in Nashville, which is really cool. And I think collectively, the support of the companies allow for that employee to feel comfortable to come out. So all in all, it's really helping, you know, new people getting involved.
Yeah, that's very true. So thank you all. The next thing that I wanted to ask is how, in your experience, what has been like the most helpful coming from an employer in creating a welcoming environment, and how can these Southern music businesses and employers in the South make things like help create a more inclusive environment and diversify their workforce more?
I think that for me, when I was going over what I was going to say, I was like, I don't have bad experiences here. I don't have anybody that has discriminated against me, has openly just looked down upon me because of my sexuality. And I think a lot of that's been because of my employers and the stance that they've taken and how hard they've worked to make such a safe space for everybody, no matter what sexual preference you have, no matter what gender you are, race you are, ethnicity, religion. They don't care. They want you to show up. They want you to do a good job. And that's what matters, right? I think that people often get really caught up in what makes us different, that we don't really realize, you know, we're there to do the same job. I do the same job as how many other people in my company, and it's not what makes us different that determines how we do our job. It's what we have in common. And I think overall in the world right now, that's what we need to be focusing on more. I mean, I have people who, I'm probably the only queer representation they get in their lives. And to me, that's sad, but it's also an opportunity for me to just connect with people. And that's what I love. I love when I don't take it for granted. When people come to me and they're like, what is this about? Or like, what is, like, let's talk about gay marriage, or let's talk about trans rights, or let's talk about like gender identity. That's the opportunity for me to say, hey, you know, this is something you don't understand. This is something I've got my feet dipped in a little bit more than you do. So let me kind of guide you. Let me tell you that what you're thinking makes me so different from you really doesn't. So that's my 2 cents on that.
I think it's very important that each company has a diversity empowerment team. Like BMG has that, NBC has that. I mean, the amazing way NBC functions is you have your group and your voice is always heard with the cares and concerns of whatever your group needs. And BMG has that, you know, has very, very, very listening, open ears, which is fantastic. And I think that's what every company needs to have, because then that makes the leadership and everybody recognize the voices that need to be heard. And I think that's across all diversity, gender, sexuality, I think it all. And I think, you know, I was sharing with BMG how NBC was set up because it was so fantastic. So I think that it starts with the top down, with the top knowing that that's important to have, and then letting everybody fall underneath. I mean, that's where it happens. I mean, one of our execs is a lesbian, and she's just straight up, she's like, this is happening, you know, and you're just like, yes, like, here it is. So it starts with the top down. Yeah. And being a German company,
Brian,
you know.
Totally agree with you. And I think one of the best examples I've seen has been Warner. My wife works there, so I've got to see a lot of examples of what they do. And I think it can be so simple. I think it can be as simple as encouraging your employees to include their pronouns in their email signature, or you know, organizing a walk group during Pride Parade. It doesn't have to be necessarily something that you do weekly or monthly, but I think that when you see companies do something like that, like, at least as a queer person in my head, the first thing I think of is like, okay, the people that work there are safe, or, you know, those are people that I want to network with, because you don't have any fear of, okay, well, it's in the South, or it's Christian music especially, or, you know, whatever it is. I think that visibility in the community, especially during Pride Month, and also just training. I think that in the same way that we do like sexual harassment training, or a lot of companies do, I think that there are videos and there are resources and there are a lot of things that employers can encourage, even to just understand LGBTQ issues, that I think would have a really amazing trickle-down effect.
I think part of that also is just creating a safe space. Like, I don't want to walk into my office building and immediately just be like, oh my God, I don't feel safe here. I don't know who I can trust. I don't know who I can come out to. I actually have a really great story about that. My first like 2 weeks there, I was fresh out of college, and I didn't know if I should be coming out so quickly or not. Like, I'm from Texas. My parents are conservative. They really kind of err on the side of caution with that kind of thing. And they had actually told me not to come out. So I went to lunch when I got placed on a team at Flood, and it's my first lunch with my team. I think I was running late. I was by myself. Everybody else kind of drove together. It was raining. So I'm like just a frazzled mess. I sit down at the table, and my boss is like, okay, what we do at these lunches is we grill all the new people. So first question, who are you dating? And I was like, all right, this is my moment. This is my moment to out myself. Like, I can either lie and hide this part of myself for who knows how long, or I can just come out and say it. And I did, which ultimately was absolutely the right decision. You should never hide yourself. But it was such a fun moment for me because I mean, the gay panic that I felt, I was like, oh shit, like, what do I do? But it went so well and nobody batted an eye and nobody thought it was abnormal that I know of anyways. I think it surprised a lot of people because you look at me, I'm a cisgendered heterosexual passing woman, you don't assume. But just ever since that day, it's just been, I knew it was safe because nobody cared and nobody blinked weird, nobody said anything weird, nobody tried to change the subject real quickly. It was so smooth. And I think it's super important for people who are, like you said, at the top to have that trickle down effect of, you know, if this doesn't bother them, it shouldn't bother anybody else under them. And that's ultimately, I think, venues, labels need to be really a safe space for artists who are queer, who are anything besides the norm. I like try to think of queer artists and, you know, you've got Brandi Carlile and then things start getting a little slow. And I don't want it to be that way. So overall, just that's what we're begging for right now, right? Is a more diverse place, a more diverse industry. So that's what I got.
Yeah, the representation part, like, I mean, I feel like you look at me and I'm queer. Like, I don't know. My wife is more feminine. So if she's with my son, it's like they are just like a, you know, mom and a son. And then you throw me into the mix, like, oh, that's a gay family, like, you know? So all of a sudden that becomes that. But I mean, for me, for like the representation part at like being with the company for so long, or just being myself, you know, and also the pride part, just for, I never want Archie, who is my 5-year-old, to never think that we're like a normal family or there's something wrong with him. So I think like it goes outside of workspace and just like, this is who we are. We're just like everyone else, you know? So yeah.
Awesome. That was a great story, Laramie. Glad to hear it. And I think everybody's input is very true. I think a lot of it is having that representation in the upper management of the company. And I know we talked on it a little bit, but going off of, you know, what companies you felt safe in, does anyone have places that they've felt have been a really safe space, whether it be a company or a venue or an organization in the music industry, particularly in the South, but also just anywhere in the industry that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Well, I guess after I got married, almost every single one of our clients, which are record labels, sent us wedding gifts, which I was like, oh my gosh. So Capitol Records, Republic, Island, UMG Nashville, Sony, Big Machine. I'm probably missing some, but I was just floored by the fact of like, oh, like even our own families had issues still. 2020, I'm related to them. And I mean, they do love me, but it's like there was still kind of some things there once I actually got married. So seeing it being celebrated and actually acknowledging. And so that's something we try to do anyway, Veva does with our clients, but actually celebrating in their happy moments. So like a wedding with 2 brides and actually getting all of this joy and people excited around it is something really cool.
Yeah, Deborah, going off that, when my wife and I got married as well, we got, you know, shout outs or cards from my management company's clients, and Warner was also phenomenal about immediately sending us information on, you know, here's our resources on fertility or family planning, you know, all that kind of stuff. So we were lucky as well. We got married in September, so recently married, but it was a welcome surprise where we both were like, wow, we kind of thought that this was just going to be like, not a quiet thing because you never want to hide it, especially when you're getting married, but we didn't think it was going to be as acknowledged.
Totally. Yeah, I was very surprised.
Music industry.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So now I'm going to open up to some questions from the audience. So I'm going to go ahead and read Monique's for her first. So she wanted to ask, what pride organizations in Nashville should music industry executives be aware of when trying to build a diverse team, if anyone knows of? All I can think myself is the LGBT Chamber of, is it Chamber of Commerce? Or am I mixing that up with something?
That sounds right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, companies can go there, and if you go on that website, you can see right off the bat companies that support LGBTQ because they're listed on that commerce page.
Awesome. Okay, we can link that. Does anyone else know of any places that are a good resource for partnering with a corporation?
HRC is great.
Sorry, what was that?
HRC.
HRC.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, HRC
Yeah.
in Nashville, and then what's the other one, Shelly?
No, just
Do y'all have Equality Tennessee like we have Equality California?
we do.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we have that one.
Awesome.
Is Glad here?
Yeah.
Yeah, Glad's in Nashville as well. I think. I should know
Glad.
more about this, shouldn't I?
Yeah. I mean, we need because we don't have a Nashville Pride this year, we would get to see all the sponsors normally on the 10th, but we'll try to put those resources on the social media. That was a good question. And then also I'm gonna have Ella ask her question herself. If I can get her unmuted.
Hi y'all, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was wondering, I'd love to hear from each of you on this. So what do you think is your greatest strength being a member of the LGBTQ community in the industry, like Southern or otherwise? Just like, what do you think you bring to the table personally from that?
I think someone mentioned, like, I feel like when you do end up working with other queer artists, I think them being able to see someone across the table that they can relate to, I think is always helpful. I've worked with a handful of queer artists, and it's not like it's necessary, but it's just to have someone on their team that understands them in a different way. So
Yeah, being myself. I mean, being just the knowledgeable gay that I am, who I am. Just, when like we just released the new Kylie single, and I was able to gauge it with my friends if it was resonating, and I was like, hey, the gays like it, so it's doing pretty well in my neighborhood. So like, being on the A&R teams of bands that have, like, we have Rise Records, a very hard record label, and we have a band called Blood Bather with a non-binary guitar player, and the label supports everything, and they use the right pronouns and everything that they would like. So being the person that educates, I've been that person in most of my jobs. And I always say first, I'm not speaking of the whole queer community, I'm speaking on behalf of me, and then you can do some more research, but just being the example, I bring that to the table. And I'm not a marketing guru, but I can tell you what people that I know are going to enjoy. So from the meetings about this song's not going to work in the clubs, I'll tell you, not at Mickey's in WeHo. No one's going to play this song.
I'll echo off of that. I think anybody who knows me knows that I'm the loudest mouth you are ever going to hear coming in our office doors. And honestly, like, personally, that's what I bring to the table. But like Brian said, we are the opinion you're not getting. I am the only queer woman that I know in an office of 150 people. And that gives me that I have knowledge that you don't. And just to have that acknowledged and to have that welcome in the room, I think is a very powerful tool, because we should be listening to anybody who's different. I mean, right now we're in the middle of such social unrest and movement that we've got to be listening. And for people who are running companies, listen to the right people. I don't need some white man telling you what I need. I need to tell you what I need, because I know better than anybody. And that's what we need to be taking away right now, is that let's listen to people that we're actually talking about, because excluding us from the conversation, it's not going to help you.
Yeah, echoing off that, I think it gives you a unique perspective, because, you know, there's intersectionality in everything, and some people are more oppressed and more privileged than others, but I think that it offers, at least I feel like it offers me a unique perspective in the sense of kind of what like Laramie and everyone has said, of just an extra layer of like, okay, well, how does this translate? And what are the potential, you know, pitfalls or shortcomings or whatever that could be in this marketing message? And I think it just kind of adds a different perspective. And so it's like, if it, you know, if it kind of passes all the tests, then I think it's just, I think differing opinions in every room are great. And obviously, if you are a heteronormative person, you don't have the same experience as a homosexual person. So it's, I think it just honestly adds more knowledge into everything you do as a business if you have just a more diverse staff.
Very true. So that's all of our questions from the audience, but since we have a little bit more time, I'd like to ask everybody on the panel a wrap-up question, kind of lighthearted, but kind of a loaded question. If you could give advice to yourself entering the industry back when you first started, or advice to someone just starting off who is LGBTQ, trying to get their foot in the door in the industry, what would you tell them?
I think similar to what Kaitlyn just said, as far as like being yourself, and like your queerness is almost like your superpower, and it's just, you know, like she said, you bring a different perspective to the table, and I don't know, just be you.
Yeah, every job I've ever gotten has been based on my confidence in knowing that I could do that job. That confidence comes with the confidence I know who I am as a person. So if you love yourself, then you're going to do better and represent yourself better, and then be a better employee, because that's what they want to trust, that you're going to be able to do your job and work well with others and have a good time. And then if you are who you are, you bring that unique knowledge of whatever it is, whatever you know more about. I don't play guitar, so I couldn't advise on being a guitar, but I do play drums. So being a gay drummer in a band, I can talk about, like, I know what that goes on. And every time I've spoken my opinions in the right time, not like when I wasn't asked, but when I was asked, I've always gotten a job promotion or a good job from that. And it's stuff like walking by a marketing, how I got my A&R job was I walked by and I didn't like the marketing campaign on the table and said it really loud. I was like, this is crap. This band does not look like this. And I walked away and I got a job 6 months later, just being myself, being the sassy dude I am.
Going off that, I think being yourself is obviously the biggest thing, but then I think like trying to find people to look up to, especially that are queer in the industry. I think for me, a big one was Jason Owen. I mean, I think going into management, especially in the South, I always wondered, like, you hear about the boys club and it's certainly there and it's certainly a real thing, And I think that, you know, being a female manager is already scary. And then being a queer female manager is like a whole nother level of scary. And I think trying to read more about like what he did and kind of like his path and the big wins that he's had has kind of been like a little beacon for me. It's like, okay, well, if he can be a gay male and one of the best managers in town, like, then that doesn't, you know, exclude me from being able to do this. And so I would say, own who you are, but also try to find your people that you can just follow and just see, follow their wins and follow their story. And if you ever have the chance to get connected with them, because it's given me a lot of confidence as far as being able to do what I want to do in this town.
Yeah, I think I would follow that with saying advice I would give someone now. It's come along so much further than when I feel like I was getting into it in Nashville. And so I think that's also exciting. Like, you can really look up and find companies that have a lot of gay employees and they're out, or that you can even go to Pride in Nashville and see all the companies involved. You know, I think it was CMT that did a big thing with t-shirts and all kinds of stuff. And so not going towards a company that you think, I feel like now it's like you can find companies that are really open about being supportive. So try there first. Like, you don't have to like reinvent the wheel as much because so much progress has been made. Like, you can probably find a job that is outwardly, like we're talking about all the labels we work with, Warner, how you've been talking about Warner. It's like there's so many companies that outwardly support it. So go there, go to Flood, right? Flood's amazing. And I didn't know that. Like, we work with them on different things, and I didn't know that you were the only person there, but that they're so supportive. Like, that's so exciting, you know?
Yeah, I mean, everybody said it, be yourself. It's the best advice you can give anyone that you can give yourself. And on top of that, speak up. If something's not going right, say something about it. And if that conversation goes badly, leave. You are worth more than subjecting yourself to people who do not find you worthy because of what makes you different. And speaking up for not only yourself, but the entire LGBTQ plus community. There are so many of us. There are so many things that make us different, but they call us a community because that's what we are. And we stick up for one another. I think something that is hugely missing from even this conversation is we don't have any trans representation. We need it. We need more representation. And just be cognizant of that and check your privilege. If you're like me, if you're a white, cisgendered, heterosexual passing woman or man, acknowledge that and use it, because the chances are people are going to listen to somebody who looks like me over somebody who doesn't look like me. And that's unfortunate. That is extremely unfortunate. But again, be yourself, use it to your advantage and to others.
Wow, very powerful note, Laramie. I'm feeling the uplifting. I'm feeling it. But everybody, thank you so much for being on this panel. It's definitely such a needed conversation, and I'm glad that we were able to initiate this. And I hope that from this, employers watching will think of some ideas to, help everybody feel welcome and start creating a more diverse workplace. So thank you so much to all of the panelists for coming and talking to me today and sharing your experiences. It was a great panel, and I wish everybody well, stay safe, and thanks for coming out tonight, guys.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Carla.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you, everybody, so much.